Okay, I want to cover a slightly different technique of checkmating the enemy king with king and rook. In my last lecture I covered sort of the knight's hop method, and here I just want to cover a method which is actually a little bit quicker and uses more of this trapping the king in a box and making the box smaller and smaller. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So first it starts off just like the last one. We're cutting off, we're putting the king in a box, so technically this is the box. What we're going to do is we're going to shrink this box whenever possible with the rook, and if we can't safely move the rook and make it a smaller box, then we're going to move the king. Okay, and usually we can move our king. When we move our king, we'll end up moving it closer to the enemy king, but sometimes we may have to make sort of a waste a move. I covered that in the last lecture, where we're just not really doing anything, but we're setting it up where the black king, its next move, we'll be able to make the box smaller. So let's say the enemy king moves to here. Okay. Now, whoops, I don't know what those are doing there. So. Oh, those were left over from my last lecture. But basically, you could say, why didn't the king move the other way? Well, if the king moves this way, we'll just move our rook to here. Okay, making a different box. And that's okay, but if you don't know, usually if you're in this situation, you want to try to keep your king in the center of the board, and this is actually moving the king to the side, because we know the king can only get checkmated on the side of the board. So the king is interested in staying in the center. This is one of the reasons why more likely the king will move to this square. And then what we do is that we'll just make the box as small as possible. Now, what are the squares? We can't move the rook here because it would just be captured by the king. We don't want to really move it over to here, because the king could just come on over. We want to sort of move the rook into a position where the king, the king and rook are going to work together, so they have to be very close together. So I'm going to close off the box by putting it here. That way, if the enemy king comes back to attack the rook, I'm just going to move my king up to here, and I'll have the box. When the rook will be, the king, this king will not be able to capture this rook. So, actually, let's say that happens. King moves back, we just move our king up. Okay, now, the king can move back, and if the king moves back, we'll just follow the king. So, and we'll just actually make our checkmate even quicker. But let's say the king goes this way. Well, what I said was, if we can make the box smaller with the rook, we will. And we can. Now, we don't want to check the enemy king. In fact, you really never check the enemy king except for checkmate at the very end. Because if we check him this way, the king will actually just run to this side, and we won't really make this box smaller. So what we want to do is just move the rook over one. Now our box is, this big. Okay, it's just one small thing at a time. Okay, now let's say the king moves over here. We'll just make the box smaller. Okay, here's the box. Oops, I didn't mean to highlight the square, but there's the box now. Now let's say the enemy king moves here. Well, now we can't really move the rook over to here, because it'll be captured. And I can't really safely move the rook here either, because it's just checking. So we really can't make the box smaller with the rook, so we're going to move the king. So we're going to move the king up. I noticed, when in doubt, the king will sort of stay in the middle of the board, because this king is going to get driven to the it's going to get driven to any one of the sides, to the back, or to the side. When our king comes up, it's going to sort of come up, and if this king goes backwards, then our king will sort of go sort of up the middle and backwards. Okay? And if the king goes to the side, then our king will probably, will sort of come up the middle, but then around. So the king sort of comes to the middle first. That's sort of a good rule of thumb if you're not too sure which side to go on with the rook. So let's say king comes back. Well, once again, I can't move my rook with making the box smaller. Okay, so I'm just going to move my king up. Now, sort of there's two ways that this enemy king could go. It could sort of go this way and this way. Okay? So if the king goes up, I'm just going to move my rook up, make the box smaller. If the king goes this way, I'm just going to follow the king, because once again I can't move my rook to make the box smaller. So I'm just going to sort of chase right after the king. Let's say the king goes up. If you think about it, the king, if it moves up, it's actually in a smaller, we'll make the box smaller, it's actually in a larger box than if it were to move. Once it moves here, if it moves up, its box is technically this big. Okay? If we're to move, and that's a 12 squares. I guess it's, but if it moves this way, if the king actually moved to this square here, then its box would actually only be 10 squares. Okay, so the king would probably move here. If that happens, we're just going to move the rook up. And now let's say the king decides to say, hey, if I just move up, you're going to move up. So it now tries to go to the side. Well, good. We'll just follow the king like I said. Now the king, let's say, it doesn't matter where it goes. It can go either way, this way or that way. And we're just going to move our rook over 1. Okay, so let's say it goes up. Just going to move our rook over, make the box a little bit smaller. Let's say, hey, the king moves back. Now you're panicking because you said, well, I can't move my rook to here, or here. And if I move my king away, let's say to here, I'll lose my rook. So what do? I can't go anywhere. Well, just go back. Go back. Remember I said wasting a move. This is sort of like wasting a move, because now whatever direction the king goes will be good. If the king goes up, we're just going to move our rook up, make the box smaller. If the king goes this way, we're going to chase the king like this. Okay? Let's say the king goes up. I'm just going to go up. Let's say the king goes up. Now realistically, I can't, move my rook up and make the box smaller because I'd move the rook, so I'm just going to move my king up. It's going to come back down. No worries. I'm going to move, I can't move the rook to make the box smaller. I'm just going to move my king up. Notice how this king started down here somewhere and has sort of gone up the board, sort of this way. It sort of came this way and then up. The black king has sort of come over and gone up. Notice how we've sort of been chasing the king a little bit, but our king has stayed somewhere in the middle of the board. So let's say now the king decides to go, okay, well, actually, it should move to this square. Once again, if it moves to this square here, then it's actually going to be trapped on a 4x4. And if it actually moves this way, it's actually going to be trapped on a sort of a 1x3. So let's say the king goes here. We can make the box smaller here. Okay. Notice how this, the king is really in a box. It's almost checkmate now. Let's say the king goes back. Or let's say it goes this way. Try to give us a trick. No problem. Then we just move our king up. And then the king only has 1 square. And then we just go over 1. And that's checkmate. let's say the king went the other direction. Instead of going to the side to A7 to this square, you know, it goes up, or even into the corner. Let's say it goes up. Well, great. We'll just move our rook up one. The king only can exist on two squares, here and here. Or the black king can only survive there. So now we'll just can only go back between those. We just sort of move our king over, goes back. We go over. It has to go into the corner. We deliver checkmate. So, okay.